Old Hollywood seemed like a dream, right? Perfect faces, perfect lives. But let me tell you something that isn't often mentioned. Many of the biggest stars dealt with deformities and disabilities, and the studios? They went to some wild lengths to keep all that under wraps. Seriously, they hid it in magazines, rewrote scripts just to make sure no one would notice, and even pushed these stars into painful and risky treatments. All of this just to maintain that shiny illusion of perfection. Behind those glamorous red carpet smiles, years of quiet suffering, strict contracts, and a whole system that turned people's vulnerabilities into tools for control. So today, we're peeling back that curtain and revealing the secrets, the pain, and the shocking exploitation that Hollywood really didn't want you to know about. Number 1. Judy Garland, the hidden support behind the spotlight. You know, most folks are aware of Judy Garland's struggles with exhaustion, overwork, and the often harsh studio system. But what many don't realize is that she was also dealing with a less visible issue, a slight difference in the length of her legs. It might sound minor, but this little imbalance had a big impact on her walk and put a lot of strain on her hips, back, and knees over the years. When she was filming The Wizard of Oz, MGM quietly tried to fix this by sneaking orthopedic lifts into her famous ruby slippers. Those lifts were hidden under all that sparkle, helping to level her stance. But man, did they come at a price. The shoes were already tough to wear, and adding those inserts just made them that much more uncomfortable for her during those long hours on set. And let's talk about her role. It called for some serious dance routines under those intense studio lights. Imagine wearing costumes that looked light and breezy but were actually heavy and restrictive. The yellow brick road? It was coated with some shiny stuff to give it that classic look, but that made it super slippery. A real challenge when you're in altered shoes. The studio was all about keeping up her image as the sweet girl next door. But behind the scenes, that meant they had tight control over her body and habits. She was on this exhausting cycle of stimulants to keep her going and then sleeping pills to bring her down at night. Combine that with the discomfort from her condition and the grueling filming hours, and it's no wonder she faced lasting issues both physically and mentally. Even though Garland later opened up about how she was treated at MGM, she never shared the secret of those lifts in her slippers or the full extent of her struggles. It's just another reminder of how Hollywood back then could wipe away anything that hinted at imperfection, even if it meant burying someone's truth. Number 2. Harold Lloyd, the daredevil who hid his greatest injury. So back in 1919, when Harold Lloyd was really starting to make a name for himself in the world of silent comedy, he posed for what was supposed to be just another routine publicity shot. He was given this little prop, a smoke pot meant for special effects. Turns out, it wasn't harmless at all. It was a live explosive. Can you believe that? The thing blew up in his hand, taking off his right thumb and index finger, burning his face, and even leaving him temporarily blind. At the time, the press was quick to declare that his career was done for. But you know what? Lloyd wasn't about to let that define him. He got this custom glove made to hide his injury. They painted it to match his skin tone and padded the empty fingers to look like a real hand. On set, he was super careful with his movements, holding props just right or keeping his injured hand out of the camera's view. Seriously, the audience had no idea. During the silent film era, looking perfect was everything, especially for someone known for crazy stunts. If anyone saw his disability, it could have cost him major roles. But instead of backing down, Lloyd leaned into his unique style of high-energy comedy. He climbed skyscrapers, dangled from clock towers, and jumped between moving cars, all while having to work around his limited grip and dexterity. He had hidden harnesses and rigged supports as his little secret helpers on set. When the cameras were off, he was living with nerve pain and scar tissue, but you hardly heard him talk about it. For ages, his injury was one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets. And when it finally came to light, it just added to his legacy, not just as a comedic genius, but as one of the bravest performers to ever light up the silent screen. Pretty inspiring, right? Number 3, Lon Chaney Sr., often called the Man of 1,000 Faces, really earned that title through some jaw-dropping transformations. You know, he had a pretty unique start in life. Born to deaf parents, he picked up sign language as a kid, which gave him this incredible control over his facial muscles. This skill? It was the backbone of his silent film performances. But here's the kicker. The iconic roles he played came with a hefty personal price. Chaney often went to extremes, pushing his body to its limits with some seriously risky, self-inflicted changes. Take the Hunchback of Notre Dame, for instance. Chaney wasn't about to just throw on a padded hump. Nope. He created this crazy 70-pound contraption made of metal and plaster that crushed his chest and made it hard for him to breathe. The pain was so bad that he could only handle it for a few minutes at a time before he'd collapse, gasping for air into the arms of his crew. People who worked with him later shared that his spine never really bounced back from that ordeal. Director Wallace Worsley had a particularly harrowing memory of Chaney. He found him doubled over, even vomiting blood between takes. When Worsley suggested he try lighter materials, Chaney was having none of it. Quasimodo suffered, he insisted. I must suffer too. Can you believe that? Then there was the Phantom of the Opera. Chaney took things to a whole new level of madness. He actually threaded thin wires into his nostrils to make them flare out, shoved metal hooks inside his mouth to stretch his lips back, and used harsh chemicals to paint his eye sockets, giving him that eerily hollow stare. The fumes, they messed with his eyesight for a while. And let's not forget about London After Midnight. That might have been the toughest gig of all. To nail that creepy vampire grin, he used sharpened wires along his gums. Yeah, leaving him with wounds that later got infected. He ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks because of blood poisoning. But the studio just brushed it off, telling everyone he was exhausted. All those years of punishing his body took a toll. It left him fragile, and ultimately, it contributed to the pneumonia that took his life at just 47. Those who were close to him said his last words were hauntingly reflective of the price he paid for his art. I've created monsters, now they've created me. Number 4. Rita Hayworth, Hollywood's painful reinvention. You know, when Columbia Pictures brought Rita Hayworth on board, they didn't just sign her, they completely transformed her. It all started when studio head Harry Cohn first laid eyes on the young Margarita Cancino. He looked at her Spanish features and low hairline and thought, no way, this won't sell to American audiences. And that set off one of the toughest image makeovers Hollywood has ever seen. For over a year, Rita went through the painful process of weekly electrolysis to push her hairline back more than an inch. Can you imagine? No anesthesia, no creams to numb the pain, just a towel clenched in her mouth while electric needles seared her scalp, plucking out hair one by one. Sometimes it hurt so much that blood would actually seep through her blouses by the end of a session. It's heartbreaking, really. She never talked about this struggle publicly, but a makeup artist once recalled her quietly saying, I have to wait for the scabs to heal before I can sleep on that side of my head. Just think about that for a moment. And there was more going on beneath all that glitz. Few people knew that one of her legs was shorter than the other. Every stunning heel she wore was custom made to hide that difference. Her left shoe was raised almost an inch higher than the right. Those mesmerizing dance numbers that made her famous? She performed them while battling intense pain in her hips and back, all to keep her balance. The psychological toll? Just as heavy as the physical. Columbia's PR machine trained her to completely deny her heritage, telling her to act confused if anyone asked about her Spanish roots. They made me ashamed of who I was, she later shared with her daughter. They told me no one would want a Spanish girl. And here's the kicker. After all that suffering to fit into Hollywood's mold, Rita found herself stuck in that made-up image. Reflecting on her iconic role, she once said with such honesty, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me." Number 5. Montgomery Clift, the idol. Rebuilt back in the early 1950s, Montgomery Clift was the talk of Hollywood. I mean, he was the golden boy, good-looking, intense, and had this brooding charm that just drew people in. But then, everything took a dramatic turn one night in May 1956. So, after a dinner party at Elizabeth Taylor's place in Beverly Hills, Clift got into his car. Unfortunately, things went south fast. He lost control on a winding road and slammed into a telephone pole. Can you imagine? Taylor rushed to him, managing to pull him from the wreck just in time to stop him from choking on his own broken teeth. The crash was brutal. His jaw was shattered, his nose was broken, and he had deep cuts all over his face. The recovery process? It was no walk in the park. The surgeries were painstaking. Doctors wired his jaw shut and tried to piece his features back together. From the front, he still looked like the man everyone adored, but turn him to the side, and it was a different story. His left cheek was paralyzed due to nerve damage, and one side of his face looked sunken. Hollywood, of course, tried to manage the situation quietly. Directors would frame him just right to catch his good side. Lighting crews worked hard to soften any shadows, and publicity photos? Yeah, they were retouched to mask the imperfections. But behind the scenes? That was a whole different story. Eating and smiling became painful tasks for Clift, and he found himself relying on painkillers and alcohol just to cope with everyday life. People who cared about him started to notice a change. The once lively, magnetic star turned more withdrawn, as if he was haunted by his scars, both the ones you could see and those you couldn't. Hollywood insiders even referred to his career in two parts: before the accident and after the accident. It was a bittersweet acknowledgement that no matter how much they tried to hide it, the truth was still there. But despite all this, Clift didn't give up. He kept performing, delivering some truly powerful performances in films like The Misfits and Judgment at Nuremberg. Still, that crash? It was a turning point, one that highlighted the steep price of Hollywood's obsession with perfection and the human cost lurking behind all that glitz and glamour.